Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones, how are you today? You ever find yourself feeling nostalgic for some arcade goodness? Maybe you and your friend tried playing through some Carnival, or maybe you played that one Hook beat-em-up that was actually really awesome. Well, one of my favorite companies for arcade games has always been Taito. In fact, they made one of my most highly regarded arcade games of all time. But since I can't stretch that one game into an entire episode, I decided to take a look at where I spend the most of my time playing it. So today, folks, we're going to be looking through Taito Legends. Taito Legends is an arcade compilation game that was released for the PS2, Xbox, and PC back in 2005. There was also a PSP version called Taito Legends Powered Up, but it's a lot worse and isn't worth mentioning any further. In Japan, it was from a series called Taito Memories, and which countries got which games differs a bit by region. While the Western Taito Legends didn't include Puli Rula for some reason, the Japanese Taito Memories didn't have Colony 7, Zookeeper, Jungle Hunt, or the Electric Yo-Yo, so your mileage may vary on if it's a good trade or not. As a package deal, Taito Legends is pretty great. The menu lets you see what all of the original arcade cabinets look like, they tell you what year the game was released, give synopses, tips and tricks, cheat codes, and many of them even come with cool bonus features like showing off the arcade flyers or interviews with the original developers. It's a pretty nice set and I love popping it in when I want some arcade goodness in my life. So today, I'm going to be giving my quick thoughts on all 29 games this disc has to offer. Now, you might be asking yourself, what does Taito Legends have to do with Kaiju Month? Well, you see, the Space Invaders are probably pretty big, so it's kind of like... Look, I'm just kind of scrapping that whole thing, okay? Let's just talk about the games. So on the disc, Taito Legends presents its games alphabetically, but that's not how I want to be covering them, so I'll just be jumping around from game to game for this video. The first game most players will see is Battle Shark. This is an underwater rail shooter from 1989. For a game that's only a few weeks younger than I am, it looks and sounds great. The underwater effects are nice, and I love that your health is represented by your first-person view actually getting damaged. It's a pretty satisfying title, but maybe don't play it if you're afraid of the ocean. New Zealand Story is a platforming adventure where you control an adorable kiwi and use a variety of weapons to save your friends from an evil walrus. I don't know all the details, but apparently this game was insanely popular in the PAL region, and I can see why. It's got a lot of things that make a game charming for folks of all ages. A cute character, fun gameplay, and whatever the heck this guy is supposed to be. Exorcist, this is a horizontal shooter where you play as this spaceman spiff-looking guy. You shoot forward as well as downward and have to deal with hazards from all sides. And man, this game is fun. I may not know how to pronounce it, but who cares? This game is great, and the music is top-notch too. Also, sometimes you turn into a spaceship. Next up is Colony 7, one of the older games on this list. I'm sure these graphics were impressive in 1981, but it's not much to look at now. In this game, you control a cursor and zip around the screen shooting
invaders! Possibly from space!
And man, this game is hard. You have to defend the civilization below, but the cursor is so sensitive, it's really hard to control, and the targets are just so tiny, and like in real life, all hope is lost, and humanity is doomed, and nothing you do really matters in the slightest. What the heck just happened? Phoenix is another one of the older titles on the disc. It's from 1980, and it's sort of a blend between Space Invaders and titles like Galaga. This game is actually pretty famous for having one of the first genuine boss battles in this type of arcade game, as usually bosses weren't separate challenges. The game is very fun and pretty challenging because, yeah, it was an arcade game. Unfortunately, the sound design has not aged well for this game at all. Yeah, I had to mute this game pretty quickly. For a couple more shooters, we've got Operation Wolf. This is a first-person rail shooter where your task is to rescue hostages and kill as many of the bad guys as you can. It's not bad, but you may notice a problem I had while playing this one. I don't know if it was my disc, or maybe my controller was having an off day, or maybe it's what it was supposed to be doing, but my cursor kept drifting off to the left. This made it really hard to play, and even harder to focus on anything else that was happening. I was just mesmerized by this drifting cursor.
Going nowhere, going nowhere.
They've also got the sequel, Operation Thunderbolt. This one was a lot more fun, mostly because my cursor did the things it was supposed to, but also just because it has a lot more polish overall. Plus, the narrator of this game kinda sounds like Dex the Swede, and that's just funny to me.
Made contact with intelligent agent and obtained information.
There's also Thunder Fox, which is probably unrelated to those two titles, but I'm putting it here because Taito apparently just had a thing for thunder and dog-like animals. This one isn't a shooter though, and it plays more in the style of games like Shinobi or Rolling Thunder, and it occasionally has segments where it does turn into a horizontal shooter. It's a pretty fun time, and I found this vehicle segment to be really cathartic for some reason. The music is great, but that scream sound effect is just hilariously awful. Plotting is this puzzle game that... Look, I don't feel qualified to talk about this one. Block puzzle games just aren't really my thing. I don't like Tetris, I never finished Catherine, and with this one I'm not even sure if I'm doing what I was supposed to be doing. This might be a blast for people who understand it, and if you have friends to go head to head against, but it's not for me. Though I do really like this little potato blob thing you play as. Continental Circus is a racing game that's basically just Taito's answer to Sega's Outrun, which was released a year before. I like this game because the hints gave such helpful tips as, drive fast, which really opened my eyes to why I'm usually so garbage at racing games. Anyway, it's not a bad game, but it's just not for me. Also, it has nothing to do with the circus, which I find very disappointing. Yeah, I know the word circus is often used to talk about racing in Japan where this game was made, but I don't care. Slap a few clowns and an elephant on this game and I'll give it another shot, but for now, I'm moving on. Rastan is one of those games from the era where everybody just kinda had their own Conan the Barbarian. You run from one side of the screen to the other, swinging a sword at monsters and climbing vines, and naturally, everything wants to kill you and will kill you. Rastan himself is apparently made out of sugar because a brief dip in the river causes him to dissolve into nothingness. The game feels, looks, and plays fine, but it's just not really my cup of tea. Which is probably for the best, because if it was, Sugar Man here would probably just dissolve in it. Elevator Action is probably the second most exciting game about riding elevators you'll ever play. You're in a great big building and you ride elevators and occasionally shoot people. Sometimes you shoot people on elevators, sometimes you shoot people on elevators, and sometimes the elevators kill you. Also, the N in action is the dude holding a gun, so... You know, that's just great. I love that. Space Gun, aside from sounding like a title made by asking a 6-year-old what the two coolest words are, is a pretty impressive looking railgun shooter. You shoot aliens while saving hostages, and the blood and gore as they explode look really awesome. Of course, this is an arcade game, so a lot of the times you literally can't avoid getting hit. This seems like another one that would be more fun with friends and maybe in an actual arcade, but for now, I just think it's kind of okay. And how can I talk about a compilation of Taito legends without discussing Bubble Bobble? Released in 1986, Bubble Bobble quickly became one of the most beloved video games of all time. As players control the two main characters, Bob and Bob, they will have to go through 100 levels of fun, enemies smashing their Then there was also Rainbow Islands, which, while it doesn't really look or play like Bubble Bobble, is officially the sequel to the game, and honestly, this game is pretty great too. Instead of bubbles, you shoot rainbows that can be used as weapons or platforms, and the aim is to go up rather than down. I know tons of people who've played Bubble Bobble, but not this title, and if you haven't, I think you should give this one a go. Tokyo is a vertical shooter where you play as a little red plane and fly over Japan shooting down other planes. This game looks, plays, and sounds awesome. Something I really like about this one is as you earn these little extra planes, you can press a button to change your flying formation, which changes your attack patterns. I don't really have too much else to say about this one, it's just a pretty solid shooter. Gladiator is not very fun. You play as this armored dude, and the game just kind of throws stuff at you. You can control where your shield is to protect from high, medium, and low attacks, and do the same attacks with your sword. After you get enough crap thrown at you, the game turns into a boss battle, which is basically hit them before they hit you. I really didn't enjoy this one. Though surprisingly, I did like The Greatest Swordsman. This is a fencing game that kind of operates on the same mechanics as Gladiator. You control your little guy and can shimmy back and forth, using your sword to attack high, medium, or low. Your sword can also block enemy attacks, and whoever hits their opponent first gets a point. It kinda reminds me of Needhog, except I can't just suddenly decide to chuck my sword into the other dude's face and run away. But, oh well, it's still pretty fun. Super Kicks is a sequel to Kicks, and if you've never played Kicks, your goal is to guide your character around to close off areas and clear a certain percentage of the map. While you're drawing lines, you have to not get hit by these enemies. It's incredibly simple, but it is fun and addictive. I can certainly see why people like this one. Volfied is the exact same thing as Super Kicks. The Ninja Kids is a beat-em-up, and let me say, this is one of the best games on this entire disc, but I've never heard anybody ever talk about it. I always bust this game out when I'm at a friend's house and we want to play a co-op title. You play as the Ninja Kids, who are these wooden puppet things, and your aim is to take down a cult of Satanists. It's a really fun beat-em-up, and while it has some very questionable design choices, it is a lot of fun. Each ninja uses a different weapon type and has mastery over a different element, so you can experiment to find which one is your favorite to play as. It also has a hilarious translation, with such gems as, "You will become servants of the Satan." And in a later level, when you're fighting a horde of zombies that are all apparently the old man from Family Guy, you're greeted with the classic, "Here is a graveyard of you." I think compared to any other game on this disc, I recorded more footage for this one because I just didn't want to stop playing. It's a pretty short game and totally worth playing through this with a buddy. The Electric Yo-Yo is a game where the most fun thing about it is probably the title, though it is a fairly unique take on the Pac-Man formula of getting rid of every block you see on screen. What's kind of cool is that if you Spider-Man your yo-yo string onto blocks, you can clear rows of them very quickly, but if you aren't connected to any blocks, you move around a lot slower, and you have to do all this while dodging whatever these enemies are supposed to be. I nearly cleared the first level, but got killed at the last block, so I'm just gonna move on. Plump Pop is great. While the title sounds like the caption for some artwork I would like on Twitter at 3 AM, it's a super fun game. You choose what animal family you want to play as between dogs, cats, and pigs, and then find out you're the worst parents ever as you play a Breakout-style game where you use your child as the ball. But it's colorful, charming, and even has some cool boss fights in it. I don't usually get too invested in this genre of game, but I really don't mind playing this one. Also, sorry to all my Twitter followers who have to see the artwork I like at 3 AM. I'm not gonna stop. Space Invaders is... it's... Do you really need me to expand on this one at all? It's Space Invaders. It's one of the most influential and well-known video games of all time. There's some aliens. They're coming down. Shoot them before you can. That's the game. It's great. Then there's also Space Invaders Part 2. It's still Space Invaders. There really isn't much else for me to add here. Lastly, there's Return of the Invaders. This one adds a lot more visually, but the gameplay is fundamentally the same. I like that in some of the levels their movement patterns get mixed up. For all my joking about all the Space Invaders games being the same, I don't mean it in a bad way. All three games are fun and well worth playing, but I think this is the one I'd probably come back to the most. 2-Bit! What if Tetris and the pipe puzzles from BioShock had a baby? No thanks. Also, I really just want to stop playing it as soon as possible because this guy is really weirding me out. Jungle Hunt is a game where you play as this safari dude because Taito originally had the guy look too much like Tarzan and got their butt sued, and you swing majestically from vine to vine. Majestically from vine to... Moving on. Earlier in the video, I said this disc had one of my favorite arcade games of all time. Well, folks, I've decided to save the best for last. Are you ready, folks at home? Are you ready for the glory that is... Zookeeper? I know, it's pretty great, right? I know it looks really simplistic, and it kind of is. You play as Zeke, the titular zookeeper, and your job is to run around the square arena laying bricks behind you and trying to keep the animals in their cages. What's tricky is that the animals will always break out the bricks from the inside opposite your position, so you want to always keep moving. You want to avoid touching the animals, and the best way to do this is with super physics-defying jumps! In every level, a net will pop up that will... Wait, why do the tips and tricks say it's a frying pan? It's clearly a net! You can even see it right here on the arcade flyer. It's a net! So, while you have the frying net, any animal you run into will be sent back into the enclosure. They might just bust back out again, but it's a good way to clear some hazards and earn some extra points at the end of the level. Aside from these levels are these platformer stages where you have to rescue your girlfriend from this monkey. The funny thing is, we can see from Zeke's design that he's clearly inspired by Mario. Doubly so when we look at the parallels to Donkey Kong from these stages as we're rescuing our girlfriend from a primate. The best part though? The girl's name is Zelda. This game was from 1982, several years before Nintendo's beloved series. The third type of stage in Zookeeper are these bonus stages where you have to hop over animals and go up these escalators, and I really am not good at these. The jumping in this game is very floaty, which is incredibly helpful for the other types of levels, but here, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, and I usually just end up dying. For how basic the game is though, I really do adore Zookeeper. And since the game never got any sort of home release, the Taito Legends Pack is the best place to play it. If I've convinced even one person to look into this game, I am calling this entire video a success. And so there you have it, Taito Legends, 29 arcade classics. Some are good, some are bad, but all come together to bring us a pretty amazing set that is well worth picking up. At the time of writing this video, the collection goes for about 10 to 15 bucks, which I think is more than worth it when you think of all the quarters you'd otherwise drop to play these games in an arcade. But for now, which titles on this disc would you be most interested in playing? What are some of your favorite arcade classic titles? Feel free to let me know all this and more in the comments below. Man, 29 arcade classics from Taito. This was a lot of fun, but I kinda just wish there were more. Like, 39 more. But that's a video for another day.